Okay, all right. So let's go live.
Oh, Shekhar also. Hey, Shekhar. It's been a while.
Hey, hi Sanan.
I'm
Good to talk.
Antus.
Okay, so
Good.
let's start. For those of you who are joining us on YouTube, you might hear some chatter on Zoom. There are lots of folks who've signed up for Swanand's talk today, and lots of familiar people, lots of unfamiliar people, and hopefully we'll have a nice conversation at the end of this session. Perhaps similar to the kind of talk that Swanand gave in the month of April on async communications. Incidentally, that the conversation after that talk went on for almost 3 hours, and I thought we'd be thrown out of the building until all of us gracefully walked out. So, thankfully, today we don't have a physical room, so we have Zoom, and so I suppose we can continue the conversations for longer, and then Swanand can moderate when he has to leave. So, without much further ado, hello and welcome to everyone who's joined us on Zoom and YouTube today, and who are watching this recording today, or you watch this talk at a future date. This is a talk today by Swanand Pagnis on the principles of project management flow, and it's organized by RootConf. I'm Zaina Baba, founder and COO at Hasgeek. RootConf is not only a forum for discussing infrastructure, operations, SRE, and security. It's also a space where we discuss engineering, culture, and scaling teams. We already had Swanand's talk on async communications last month, where we discussed the various aspects of how teams can communicate. This session today, and in July, Papers We Love will also host a session on engineering managers and what makes for a good engineering manager. So Piyush Goel, who's with us in the audience today, will be hosting that session in the month of July under Papers We Love. So do watch out for that one. This talk today essentially covers two aspects of project management, which is the first part is principles, what drives good and bad project management, and how do we reason about visibility. The other part of the talk, which actually I like a lot, is about the practical consideration. So while we have principles and principles are good to have and they're good as guideposts, I like the statement that Swanand has put today, which is say that principles only take us so far. We must still deal with Jira. And I think that that's the grounded part of the reality. So with that, I'd like to introduce Swanand, who's the CTO at Polearn, Indonesia's premier edtech company. He brings in more than 17 years of working and non-working experience with teams and companies of various sizes and compositions. You can talk to him about engineering excellence, about CI/CD and meetups any day. In his own words, he eats organization design for breakfast. In short, hit Swanand up for Swanandisms. And you can hear more about it when Swanand is here in Bangalore in July and August. So if you'd like to meet Swanand in person, do cheer up so that he can come back to Bangalore and suggest a topic that you'd like to speak to him about, and RootConf will host it. If there is also an active RootConf Telegram group, I'll post a link to that on YouTube and Zoom, so you can join the Telegram group and continue to have conversations with Swanand over there. There's also a comments link in which you can post more questions for Swanand. In terms of asking questions for today's session, if you have joined this talk via Zoom, you can post your questions directly on the chat, or you can raise your hand. We have SVS with us who will be moderating the question answer session today. Thanks SVS for doing this. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can post your comments in the link that I've shared on YouTube, or you can ask your questions on chat and SVS will pick it up and take it to Swanand. With that, I'm going to hand this over to Swanand, and I hope all of us have a good session today. Talk via Zoom. You can post your questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sena. Hello, everyone. Welcome. And thanks for giving a couple of hours of your busy lives to this topic. Project management is something very dear to me. Like if you ask my team members, like I keep giving them gyan. And the Swanandisms have gotten out of hand. They started calling me like tech dad, because of the dad jokes and me acting like the dad. But this talk is sort of written out of frustration of many years, that some of the things that we ought to know by default, or we ought to teach by default, are simply not talked about. And if you try to look at literature around project management, it's very theoretical, right? PMP certification and whatnot. Nothing really practical and everyday lived experience around those things exists. So I started sort of digging into why that, or why this so a couple of years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, because I sort of lucked out in my life that I worked with stellar project managers with me, right? And these were not project managers by title, right? It doesn't have to be a title. There is somebody in the team who is amazing at organizing information, amazing at coordinating, and they sort of, these are what I call as the 10x multipliers of the team, right? Because one of the things I firmly believe in is bad project management makes everything 10x worse, and good project management makes everything 10x better. Right? It amplifies both bad and good of the team in a way that is uh, can be like detrimental to the business or the opposite, right? And so that's why like I started, so this talk sort of started taking shape a few years ago, and then over a few years I was able to beat it into a narrative that everybody can sort of work with or go with, right? So I'm going to start sharing the slides now, and let me know when you see them, and we'll go through them. Like Zainab said, there are two parts. Part one is actually my favorite, principles, and then part two is obviously the practicals, where I'll go through Jira as an example, but they apply to almost everything else. There's linear and ClickHouse, and there are a bunch of other ClickUp and a bunch of other tools. Trello, one of my favorites. So we'll go through some of those similarities and whatnot, and what really works. But I do want to talk about the principles and spend some time, because my hypothesis is that if you understand the principles that I'm about to share, you can build your own system, right? One of my uh, what do you say, pet ways of improving and growing in career is to bring some original thinking, right, to everything we do. And so I want to pass on some of these principles so that you can bring your own original thinking to this, right? You don't have to do project management my way, right? I think I want you to do it your way, right? But then these things should guide you to the right path. All right. Can we see the slides? Like, are the slides visible?
Yeah.
Okay. One second. Let me close the chat. All right. So the title is Principles of Project Management Flow. It's actually it's a playbook for effective work management, and the title very specifically derives from this phenomenal work from Donald G. Reinerson. Are there people who have read the book, this particular book? Today is not about this book, so but I'm just generally curious if people have read this book. Those who are in the software engineering and product development world, they need to like do a favor to themselves and read this book. Anyway, moving on. This is me. I'm currently the CTO at CoLearn, where we make education software for children, school-going children in Indonesia. And I've been here for about 2.5 years now. And the thing is, I have a track record of working on things before they become cool or hot or whatever you call it, right? I worked on AI and ML systems for about 4 years when I was at Remax. This was 5-6 years ago. Then I worked at fintech, built a credit card processing system again like 6 years ago. Then last mile, dispatch track, early part of my career, 5 years worked on. Last mile is hot right now, but I worked on it like some time ago. So currently I'm in tech. I broke the trend and I jumped into ed tech, which is still supposed to be cool. And then now it's fast becoming not so cool, right? So we'll see. I also have a 15 plus years of experience in working in remote teams of all flavors, but I'm not going to talk about remote today. And if I do, please stop me. uh, anyway, so part one, principles, like why we'll do things a certain way, and then next is how. So, but before we go there, I want to ask a few questions, right? And this is like a raise hand thing, and I guess I'll need help from the moderators and Hasgeek team to like really figure out like how many people are answering and what people are answering. But I want you to answer this, like, what is this activity? And feel free to just unmute and speak. Really, this is not an exam, so anybody, like, what activity is this? I can't see the chat, so I would rather prefer people speaking up.
Trimming the field, the grass field.
Okay, is there another word for it? Like a more popular word?
Lawn mowing.
Lawn mowing. Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, I think that's also the response that Piyush and Natik have given.
Lawn mowing, of course, right? Lawn mowing, great. What about this? Anyone else wants to unmute and quickly chat? What does this look like? Jigsaw puzzles? Yep. Yeah, there you go. Right? Easy. What about this one? Slightly tricky. What about this one? What does this look like? I will give a hint for this one. I'll give a hint.
Sarkari
Does this,
office.
does this ring a bell? Does this photo ring a bell for this?
Marie Kondo,
Marie Kondo, right? But what is this then? What activity is this?
tidying up.
Tidying up. Yep. Tidying up. Oh my God. What about this one? One of my favorite. Like I love this activity.
Shopping.
Grocery shopping in particular, right? Okay, hang on. I want to do one quick adjustment. Chat. I potentially with this I can
Close your eyes, everyone. You don't want the spoilers.
grocery shopping, of course, right? Tidying up. So the thing is, some of these activities are not like the others, right? There's a little bit of difference in this, and so the difference. Let's see. Now think about those four activities: lawn mowing, jigsaw puzzles, tidying up, grocery shopping, right? And then think of these two questions: Are you done? And how much is done, or how much is left? Right? If you think about it, if somebody is mowing the lawn, you don't need to ask them how much is done and how much is left. You look at the lawn and you just know this part is done, this part is not done, right? They've been at it for 2 hours. You know, like so far they've done 3/4 of the lawn in 2 hours. You can extrapolate and figure out how much time it's going to take. You don't need to talk to them. You don't need to know. One look and you know whether how much is done and how much is not done, right? Lawn mowing is the epitome of project management, so to speak. So in that sense, lawn mowing is same with jigsaw puzzles. Nobody needs to tell you that, hey, this jigsaw puzzle is pending and how much of it is pending. You look at the puzzle and you know it's all done or not done. Even if one piece is out from a jigsaw puzzle, you can tell that one piece is missing, right? Nobody needs to ask, hey, how many pieces are missing? You look at it and you get to know, like, okay, yeah, maybe 7 pieces are missing, right? But tidying up is not like that, right? My definition of tidying up and my wife's definition of tidying up is very different. Grocery shopping is like that. You go, I'll not dwell much on that. I'll move to grocery shopping real quick. So grocery shopping, like you may have a list, you may have a bunch of things that you want to buy. You always end up buying some other thing. Are you done? You don't know. Maybe you want to sit down and grab a Coke or something. You went to the meat section, but then you might want to buy fish as well. Or you went to the cereal section, now you want to buy milk, whatnot, right? You're never truly done and you don't really know when you're done or not. Or if you are going as a family, which I love doing, people are in different sections of the mall, perhaps, right? Somebody's doing something. You need to coordinate. Hey, I'm at whatever so and so shop, third floor, cafeteria. Coordinate, figure out, done. Like, oh, can you take my shopping bags? Can you keep them in the car and come back? Stuff like that, right? So you never really know. There's a lot of chaos. And if an outsider or someone else asks you, are you done? You don't know. How much is done? You don't know, right? So grocery shopping is more like real life project management. Like, do you agree? But anyway, so there are a couple of powerful lessons from these simple things, right? So these were simple everyday things. Now let's move on to slightly more identifiable work related tasks, like writing a long form blog post, hiring say 5 members for your team, or fundraising, writing a novel, getting a PhD. And for all of these things, think about the same 2 questions: how much is done? Are you really done? In the context of these particular things. Or for example, if you want like more grounded software engineering product development examples, yeah, retarget users on WhatsApp, craft a trial plus paid event schedule. This is something from Aaron Jira. Increase retention by X%, right? It's if there are any PMs or growth PMs, they would know, like they have these targets, a metric like this. Right, mute bad words in an uploaded video, right? A very legit project. Like you have user generated content, you want to mute bad words in the videos they upload. YouTube, Twitter, they do all of this. E-receipts for POS, right? A third wave cafe might need something like that. So same thing, same questions you want to ask yourself. Are you done? How much is done? And the thing is, not every time the answer is easy, because there are a lot of things going on, right? These are the three questions, like, are you done? How much is done? Collaboration is needed. Multiple people need to work together in a different timeline. Something need to happen sequentially. Something needs to happen parallelly. All of those things. But the fact is that in real life, in software engineering, work is complex. There are many different to dos. Different things take different times. Right? Not everything goes at the same speed. Front-end engineering might be building the UIs at a different speed than back-end engineering building the API, domain APIs. Design might happen at a different speed, product research, etc. And multiple people need to do multiple things in parallel, and something must happen sequentially, right? One after the other. So overall work is complex, way more complex than, let's say, jigsaw puzzle, right? So, and which is why, because of these things, all the chaos we see in project management fundamentally stems from these things. There are people issues on top of that, where people are not doing the job they're supposed to do. And I don't want to get into that so much, at least this early in the talk. But the complexity fundamentally arises from some of these things, right? That inherently the work we do is complex. Like, because if you see, like, the indie hacker chugging away, like, or writing like a compiler for fun on weekend, does not need a lot of project management. They may have like a to-do list or something, like a write-up or something that they want to do, but it does not need a lot of project management. They just do it because one person, most of the things is mapped out in their head. And so that work is more like a jigsaw puzzle or long going, where one person is just at it, right? But most of us work in teams where that is not always possible. And so this talk is for, if you are an indie hacker writing a Lisp interpreter on weekend, you don't need project management. But if you are like a 5-member team with front end, back end, mobile engineers building like a fintech product for India, then you need project management, right? So now a show of hands. Have you ever felt like, so now I'm going to basically present a statement or a question, and then if you agree with it or feel like it, just like do a show of your hands, right? You felt like there were too many things on your mind. Anybody? Like all the time, right? Yeah, should I ask bunch of, like, many people raise hands. Right? Sometimes happens, sometimes doesn't. Sometimes you are in the zone, right? Completely, and you work 10x your normal. Like you're there in the moment, and you don't need anything, and you're like absolutely brutally productive. You do amazing things, right? This happens to you. You felt like you really need help on something. Like you're doing it, like you're onto it, but it'll be amazing if you had help on this, right? I feel it like all the time. Again, like very identifiable. Or and then again, somebody comes and asks you these questions, right? Maybe a boss, maybe a client, maybe your juniors, whatever. Hey, what are you working on? When will this be done? Where are we with this? Is there anybody who has not faced these questions? I doubt, right? These are like probably the most frequently asked questions in a traditional software engineering team. And I mean, come on, like, these questions are not great, honestly, right? Why do you need to ask me? Just look at Jira, whatever, right? Supposedly. Uh, Again, like, you have too many things to do, and yet you struggle to pick one and roll with it, right? Oh, I know I need to do these things, and yet, like, okay, I don't know like what to do next, or I'm just struggling. Okay, which one should I do? Uh, like, some more things, like you're working on something else came up, and now that has occupied your attention or headspace. Happens all the time to me. Actually, maybe not these days, right? Or this is a slightly rarer one, but this kind of engineers should identify this more. Have I missed something? I need like an extra set of eyes. Maybe somebody should do a code review, like one more round of code review, right? Or maybe somebody should look at my test. Am I writing the right test? Right? I just need that extra set of eyes. And so these are all common everyday feelings. I'm sure like we feel it. That's the thing, right? You're not alone. And look at the audience today. Like so many people are raising hands unequivocally, right? So you're not alone. So the solution, like the easiest solution that comes to mind, which we do end up picking up, is to-do lists, right? We do to-do lists all the time. But I think to-do lists are not great, to be honest. There are a couple of problems with to-do lists. The first problem is that usually it's a single list. Like when you maintain a to do, generally it's like a single list for any kind of context. It's a single list, so there is very little freedom, and it's a more restrictive structure. So by virtue of it being a restrictive structure, it works better for simplistic work, right? It could work for like a small part of grocery shopping. You need to buy a fixed set of things. So things like that, to-do lists generally work nice. But there's less freedom and work is more complex than that. And the second problem is there are only two states, pending and done, right? Something is on the list, either it's crossed out or it's not crossed out. Only two states. And again, like those who have done schema design would know that Boolean is a very ineffective data type. Like you never want Booleans alone. You want something more complex, right? And so this is a real life example of why Booleans are not good. Only two states, and soon you find that they are not as effective in managing your, because if honestly, if to-do lists exist or to-do lists to-do list work, you wouldn't see an explosion of to-do list tools, and you won't see an explosion of GTD principle, this principle, that principle, right? The fact is that they are ineffective when it comes to complex collaboration of work. So this is where smart people in the world invented boards, right? I don't know who invented. I think perhaps it was the Trello people, or maybe the boards, Kanban boards, or what we call boards existed before that. Surprisingly, I don't know the origin of it. Anybody knows, please do share. Don't just Google it, or Google it. Why not? But the thing is, boards give you a lot of things at the same time that lists. Single list you'll find very hard to get with single list, right? One is offload your brain, like you can put all your work in a systematic way on the board. You can batch your work, like there are like things like sprints and whatnot, backlog sprints. You can batch, you can collaborate or task work with multiple people. Fundamentally, boards enable that. There is this thing I call as one look update, right? Back to lawn mowing, right? In lawn mowing, you take a look at the whole thing once and like done or not done. So boards can give you that one look update, clarity, looking ahead perspective, where you don't have to struggle with what am I going to do next, what should I pick, or what was done in last week, last month, whatnot. Capture incoming work better. There's a little bit of a stretch. Capture incoming work better, not necessarily related to boards, but still it does give us that system. And then finally, second set of eyes, reviews and whatnot. These are so now in the next 20 minutes, we are going to go through how boards give us these things and how to think about those things. So fundamentally, there are about 6 principles. Now, first one, this is where you want to take notes, and I'll cover all the 6 principles now. First one is you need to track all the work, like every single task that needs to be done must be tracked, right? This is a superstar or star mark principle. That's why it's the number 1. Every single work that needs to be done should be tracked. This does not mean when somebody asks you to do something urgent, you go, hey, give me a Jira card or I won't work. This does not mean that. You can get the work done and then add the card to Jira or whatever, or Trello or whatever it is, right? This doesn't necessarily mean you be an idiot about the process. But what it does mean is that you need to track every single thing, right? Of course, like if it's like a really small thing, like text somebody, notify, inform somebody, doesn't mean that. You can skip some of those extremely tiny little things. But other than that, any and all work should be on that board. The reason this is important is that our brain needs to develop trust in the system that we're using, right? And it can only happen if all the work and everything is captured as a habit. Nothing gets dropped. Then the brain gets into a habit where it starts trusting the system. And trusting the system is the first step towards it becoming an effective system. So is there any co-learner here? If there is, can you please share like my favorite question about Jira boards? I ask this in every stand-up, right? Anybody? I think probably I saw like Aram.
Yeah. The question
Aram,
is that does the Jira board represent the correct status of the project?
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Aram. So basically, I ask the question at every single stand-up. is this Jira board an accurate representation of all work, right? And this is a very, very important question. Like if it's not, you're going to screw up, right? If it is, you are in a reasonably good set of hands. So you should ask this question at every stand up. Hey, is this Jira board or Trello board? I'm just using Jira as a uh, whatever stand-in for project management tools. But basically, is this an accurate representation of all work, right? Or at least all ongoing work, or all work in the near future and the near past. Yeah, I think Piyush has a good point. Like there's a lag, especially with incoming work and roadmap, etc. Or perhaps some lag between current work in progress. People haven't added it. The fewer the smaller the lag, the better. So, but again, like this is the first principle: track all the work, every single document, every single task that needs to be done. Number two, start with only 4 simple lists, right? Everything else is just throw them out. You don't need any of this. You start with these 4 simple lists. You can evolve as later, but there are only 4 lists that you initially need: to do, doing, review, done. Right? This is all you need. To do is your whatever you need to do. Doing is what you're actually currently doing. Review is that you're done. Now you need someone else to take a look at it, and then finally done. Right, you're done, and you're ready to move on to the next one. And we'll talk a little bit about done in the coming slides. Work from right to left and top to bottom. Right to left, top to bottom. Right to left is basically you always want to finish ongoing work first. That means prioritize reviewing and unblocking. So that's what right to left means. If you're done, and then review. If somebody wants your review, then you want to prioritize that, unblock people. And the thing is, I'm not saying this out of the goodness of my heart or something, right? I'm not saying because, oh, you need to collaborate and unlock and whatnot. There is simple mathematical queuing theory behind why unblocking is so important. People work at a speed far higher than any collaboration can manage, right? People are inherently fast. Software development, etc., design, all of these things are individual work is much faster, and work happens at a rate way faster than collaboration can happen, right? There is a very nice informative talk called slime mold and collaborative headwinds. It talks about how collaboration can be the biggest blocker, and even little delta changes can lead to bigger changes, snowball effect, right? So there is mathematical base and queuing theory behind why unblocking is more important than just going ahead with your tasks. It's not, you shouldn't do it because, oh, we are a good team and we review each other's work. You should do it because it is mathematically sound thing to do. And I encourage everybody to read a little bit of queuing theory, work theory, and figure out like why mathematically unblocking others should be a higher priority than finishing your own work. Of course, this is not 100% rule, right? There are sometimes like what you are doing is just way more important and whatnot. So I'll leave that to your discretion. But in general, you need to work right to left, top to bottom. Top to bottom is basically a priority order. And the reason it is top to bottom is that it's very easy visually distinguished, right? You know what is the top is higher priority, what is at the bottom is lower priority. So when you know the visually which priority order and what items are higher importance, it takes the decision making out of your brain. You don't want your headspace clouded with things that are not important, right? If there is a style of working that everybody has adopted, that style of working should reflect on the project management system that you have. You don't need to keep it in your head. You don't need to always apply those rules. Oh, if this then that, if this then that. It's in front of you. We agreed that people will work right to left, top to bottom, and always pick the work from top. You can just go do it, right? You don't have to think so much about it. Basically, you are doing some upfront thinking in order to be in the flow later. And this is again the secret of any successful software project delivery. The first 1 or 2 days of working on something are most important. This is where your thinking happens. And those who have been working for a long time would identify this, right? If you spend 2 days on estimating how much it's going to take you, you end up doing the work faster, right? You would think that, oh, I'll waste 2 days on just estimating. But counterintuitively, the upfront thinking you put in the work ends up helping you move faster. Same thing here. Like you want to figure out the priorities before. Number 3 or number 4 principle: divide the work. Divide the work into tasks of 1 to 2 days max, right? Again, these 1 to 2 days, there's no huge theoretical base to this. It's just how humans work. And there is a lot of empirical evidence in the industry uh, where if you are planning your work around 1 or 2 day chunks, then you end up doing the least amount of busy work, and you also have just enough planning. So I call it like just enough planning. So at that 2 day, 1 to 2 day is the magic mark. Any smaller is going to give you too much busy work, and any larger is not going to be efficient enough for project management. Again, this is a thumb rule, which means if your thumb is bigger than, like your 1 2 days might be 3 days, whatever. But it does help with estimates and timelines a lot. And one of the key things from project management is estimates and timelines, right? All right, number 5, the why is always more important than what, which is again way more important than how, right? And the context here is that in a team, in a competent team where people are, they know how to do their job, you barely ever need to discuss how you're going to do something, right? Of course, sometimes you want to do like architecture reviews and whatnot, you want to review the work, right? But fundamentally speaking, in competent teams, you rarely ever need to focus on focus on how, and then you do need to little bit focus on what exactly are you going to do, right? Like in the last few years, the product managers are sort of doing and focusing on this what, right? Or EMs, engineering managers, or tech leads, etc. They are focusing on the what part of the job, and then the team figures out how for themselves, right? But then I'll go one step ahead and I'll say like the why of the task is most important, because if you make clear that why we are doing something, the what and the how can change depending on the context. Sometimes you may choose to do something in a different way, or sometimes you may choose to do completely different thing because you know that this is how or this is the reason we're doing it, right? If you talk about retargeting users on WhatsApp, if you provide the context, okay, the reason we need to do this is that these people may churn and we may never end up targeting them again. You might figure out a different way of reaching the same users. It doesn't always have to be retargeting. So the why is always important. So on your Jira card or on your Trello board or card and whatnot, always start with the why to provide context. Why are we doing this? Like, what's the context? And because otherwise, you run the risk of becoming or working with Jira card pushers. Jira card pushers are like people who are not really involved in the overall flow of the work. They're just, okay, tell me what to do next. I'll just go do it, right? Very, very easy. It's extremely comfortable and easy to get into a zone where someone is just telling you what to do and you're doing it, right? And years of conditioning, parenting styles, like, it puts us in that zone. Oh, dad said it, go do it. Mom said it, go do it. You don't really question why. I mean, I do, but many people don't. So we don't want to become Jira card pushers, right? Extremely ineffective. And one day AI is going to eat up some of the jobs, and the first jobs it will eat up is those who are Jira card pushers. Anyway, and that was a joke, but bit of a stretch. Last principle, number 6: describe the finish line, not the route. Right? You want to figure out like how does it look like when this piece of work is done. Right, the done part is important. Like if you remember, we started with 4 lists: to do, doing, review, done. So that done is extremely important. What does it really mean to be done? Right, every team has their own definitions of done and whatnot, but the most important part about calling something done is that is this piece of, or does this piece of work, or has this piece of work reached the intended audience? Have they started using it? Are we seeing the results, etc., etc.? Right. So done usually means you no longer need to look at it, right? And so all, like when you are designing your cards, or when you're designing your project management system, or when you're writing your cards, you need to have a good idea about why we are doing this and what is the finish line is, right? And then team has to have a good acceptance within themselves of when are we going to move this to done, right? When are we going to call this done? Sometimes like people have this habit of, oh, I pushed the code to GitHub, done, right? Terrible idea, like really bad idea. Teams that do, I mean, I guarantee you, teams that follow that principle, they struggle with project management, and they struggle with actually getting the things done and moving the business metrics and producing value. Because pushing the code is like just, I mean, it's like you do that 10 times a day, right? We do continuous deployments in Colon. Uh, we push code to production like 10 times a day, 50 times a day. Uh, Pushing the code to GitHub doesn't mean anything, right? But getting the updates that you intended in the hands of users mean everything. Are they actually doing what we are supposed to do, or they're supposed to do? We expect them to do, and so that's done is essential. I love the project management theoretical term called acceptance criteria. Right? It really speaks to me, because it talks about like what makes this card tick. Right? That's where the acceptance criteria is, and the more effort you you take into drafting this, and keeping it terse, right? Not like you don't want to write a PRD. So it speaks to how good your project management and overall clarity is, or clarity of thought is. Overall, this part of the principle speaks directly about clarity of thought. I have this whatever Swanandisms is that one pagers get more work done than PRDs, right? A one pager is always better than a PRD. Like you don't want to write a 15-page PRD. What you really need is a one pager that clearly, lucidly explains why we're doing this and what does it look like when it's done. Same principle here. And again, lastly, don't write how to do this on the card. Lot of senior engineers or senior people have this bad habit of writing how to do this, right? When they write the card or when they write the piece of work, they have some solution in the mind, right? Or somebody even picks them up, and then they end up writing this. Oh, you know what? Doing this. Okay, why don't you talk to this API, write a wrapper, set a scheduled job, schedule the cron and whatnot, and they'll write all of this in the card. Waste of time. In fact, it's not just a waste of time. It's an active impediment in getting the things done, right? You want to add dev notes and you want to add gotchas and whatever APIs and things like that on the card. I call them dev notes or notes. You want to add those things there, perhaps, but you don't want to because you are not bound by how to do something. You are bound by why are we doing this, and then what exactly are we doing. And so the how to do really gets in the way of these two things. And if you remember our principle, why is more important than what, and then is way more important than how. And so the moment something goes in the how pile, it ends up taking and sinking all attention from what and why, and that is suboptimal. So that's why we want to avoid the how at the or as late as possible. We want to keep it towards late. So just to recap all the 6 principles: track all the work, all start with 4 lists: to do, doing, review, and done. Work from right to left, top to bottom. Divide work into 1 or 2 day chunks max. Focus on the why and context, like describe the context and finish line. And finally, like describe the finish line, not the route. We're going to take a little bit of pause here. Any questions? I'll take a look at the chat real quick.
Yeah, we have a few questions, couple of them actually. Maybe I invite the askers to ask it in their own words. Harish?
Yes. Yeah.
Harish asked regarding tracking everything. So if you could ask your
Harish,
question.
by the way, it's not Harish. I need to keep saying it to all the people. But yeah, the question was regarding how do you define the trivial of how much a task is. Like when you say that a feature needs to be implemented, there are a bunch of things that goes into the feature of when you explain the why, and the what is also fine. But when you do the how and you track the work as it is, there is like the entire smaller pieces of how to do certain things. And it's something
Right.
that the dev does, but it's kind of trivial when you look at it from a senior position. So how much do you want it to be tracked, and how do you define that trivial?
A good question, because it speaks to some of the practicalities that we're going to talk about. Usually, I leave if you're talking specifically about coding and software engineering, a lot of the how part I leave on Git and source control and the code, because those things are better explained in that context of the how. And if you really are sharing context, or if you're giving direction, it's much better done, let's say over a pairing call or something, where you can give like more context and there can be a back and forth. But sometimes like it's just kind of nifty to leave out a few notes, especially let's say you're going on a break or whatnot, you think someone else is going to pick it up, then you want to leave a detailed log of notes somewhere. But I don't add it as a part of my protocol. I add it as an exceptional circumstances. Like sometimes you just know that, okay, you know what, I need to add these notes, otherwise this will never get done, right? So I leave the minutia and those kind of details for those kind of circumstances. In general, I recommend avoiding them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
We also have a question from Piyush Goel.
Yeah. So again, I think you might have also faced this one and then others, right? So what I've struggled is usually getting the acceptance criteria from usually non-technical stakeholders, right? On the tech side, it's still easy. You're giving the task is to build an API or a stub or something, right? It's little objective. But when you're working on larger epics or stories or whatever you may want to call it, right? It's been a struggle. So how have you worked around it at Poland, or what has been your recommendation been?
Got it. Yeah. Again, like an awesome question, because we see this all the time, the same problem. I faced it, you have faced it. I'm sure a lot of the audience also faced it. The way I look at it is that any org ladder is like a reducing chunk of ambiguity, right? People at the top must be able to deal with a lot of ambiguity, and then it should sort of start coming down as you are distributing work into functions, leads, etc. And so I generally rely quite heavily on the PMs and EMs or VPs and whatnot to take that call. Okay, this is where the ambiguity stops, and this is what it means. Like we need to move some bit. Usually at the top there is a business metric to be moved. There is some strategy. Okay, we need to capture this audience, and then I really prefer that ambiguity to not leak through. And then if we have enabled the PMs and EMs to take a call on that, I think Aram can probably give a few examples later, in an off the record chat on real examples where there was an ambiguity at the top, and it was hard to get an acceptance criteria. Okay, how are we going to actually get it, right? And so sometimes the tech leads or EMs have to stand their ground and get a commitment, right? So I call, at some level there has to be a gatekeeper of the acceptance criteria. And so depending on the context of the work, it can be wherever, even in the system. I've often been that that blocker. I'll be the asshole, so others don't have to suffer. Sometimes.
Actually, this has been a source of major friction between some of my teams and the product teams, right? Because the scope keeps changing as implementation is going on, right? Use cases, corner cases will crop up. And the acceptance criteria also becomes like a moving target, essentially. So.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, some of these really boil down into people issues.
Yeah.
But other than that, if you have a clear idea about at what point does the ambiguity stop, or at what point who needs to stand up for that acceptance criteria, then it becomes a lot easier. And then I think over time we figure out okay, this needs to go all the way to engineering, or this needs to go all the way to front end, or this can stop at design, this can stop at UX, something like that, right? So those patterns evolve. I think Shreyas raised hand, I saw.
Yeah, he's had it for a while. So.
Yeah. Hi, Swanam. So I'm just wondering, a team is essentially made up of a bunch of juniors and seniors, and juniors will sort of grok these things very differently than seniors. So when you say divide work into 1 or 2 day chunks, at a senior level, that's fundamentally easier to do because they have that experience of how to divide work. But if I sort of spring all this on a junior, it gets a little too overwhelming because they're still figuring out where the guardrails are and what do I have to do and what shouldn't I do. So how do you sort of tackle these things when you have a team that's mixed between both these kinds of people?
Okay. All right. Let me phrase the question. Let me see if I understood the question correctly. Are you talking about the part of breaking the work down, or are you talking about actually doing the work?
More so just following project management sort of principles, right? In the case of breaking work down, I just took that as an example. But more so just following what we've laid down as a practice.
Got it. Okay. So okay. I think I understood the question. So what happens is, generally speaking, curating the board, as I call it, happens to be a senior people responsibility, right? The very juniors on the team are not expected to curate the whole board and make it lucid even for themselves, right? That responsibility of describing the context and finish line falls squarely on PMs, EMs, tech leads, etc. And let's say we're talking about like a complex software project. Let's say we're building a whole feature, right? It needs collaboration from whatever design, UX. Sometimes they are the same, front end, back end, etc. Or ops or DevOps, etc. Somebody like a tech lead has to divide or manage this, figure out what all pieces need to be done, and it's based on their understanding in the taste that the 1 or 2 day thing is decided, right? And then at that point, someone else is going to pick up that work. And they should have the clarity that, okay, why are we doing this? What is the context? What does the finish line look like? And then they're going to work. And let's say if you're seeing at that point the juniors are like, let's say, facing struggle and whatnot, it is up to the mentorship structures and all, like your org design, to help them get over that, right? And let's say in your particular org or anybody's org, you are saying that, okay, if I divide it down to, let's say, 2 day chunks, people are struggling, then maybe you want to try going a little bit further, going to one more level of detail and say, okay, do like 1 day chunks and then see if that works, right? But what I'm saying is that 1 to 2 is like a LCM sort of, or HCF sort of thing, where your team sort of evolves into that. Okay, if we describe work in this much level of detail, it works for everybody, right? Does it make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There is one
Thanks.
more attached principle to this, is that in teams that I run or I've run, my preference is to not assign work to specific people. I generally like keeping the board clean, the to-do list unassigned, where people can just pick work at the top, right, when they're done. Or they can have like a little bit of agreement during sprint planning or something where, okay, I'm going to work on this next. I generally avoid assigning work to anybody. People have to sign up for work. And so this ties in with that very well. If you are assigning work to one person, sometimes you can run into this problem where you have to, because if you start assigning the work beforehand, then you have to tailor the work description to that person, and then you are losing protocol there because now you need to work with idiosyncrasies of the people involved. So which is why, like, if you keep the fact that, okay, whoever is free next, when they are done, finished on their current thing, they moved it done, they're going to go look at the top one and then move it to doing, because now they have signed up for this work, right? And so if you follow that principle, then you're able to keep a clear protocol on how you write your work, right? And then of course, like, there are things like front-end people cannot pick up back-end tasks and stuff like that. Those things are going to come, and we're going to solve some of those things using labels. We'll come to labels pretty soon. Cool. I think I can see Sahil's question. Is there anything before that, Siddharth?
No. No, Sahil is next.
Okay. Sahil, do you want to like unmute and quickly speak?
Yeah, I think I mean, we could take this question later as well, because I think you just mentioned labels, and I'm assuming now there's going to be more which would probably end up answering my question. So
yeah, I think
if I still have that question, I can. Yeah, if I still have that question, I can come back to it at the end. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we'll come to organization of work in a little bit, because that's an important part in the second half. Cool. So these are the principles. I'll quickly recap and then we'll move to the next section. Track all the work. Start with 4 simple lists: to do, doing, review, and done. Almost always you will soon end up with a 5th list called blocked. We'll talk about block pretty soon. Work from right to left, top to bottom. Divide the work in 1 to 2 day chunks. I think we doubled down on this a little bit. Shayaz, I hope I answered your question to that question. If not, we can dive into that a little bit later. Focus on why and context. Very important. Every person in the team needs to understand why we're doing this. What is the context? And then finally, describe the finish line. Again, people need to know, what does it look like when we are done, right? What does it look like when we have done this? The users start using it. Right? That end line. This is also along the lines of OKRs, right? If people have done OKRs here, you know that when you are writing the KRs, the key results, you need to look into the future and answer the question, hey, we met this objective, right? Now, what does our mixed panel dashboard look like? What does the numbers show? We have met this objective. We have achieved this goal. Now, what does the reality 6 months down the line look like? And then you're supposed to describe that reality, not like I will save 30% cost on infrastructure. That's not an OKR. That's a goal. OKR is like, oh, we have done cost savings in OKR. And then whatever current burn looks like $5,000 a month. So that's a KR. Something similar happens here. Like you want to describe what does it look like when the work is done. And when we do, the magical thing that starts happening is people turn in finished work, right? The better agreement you have on done and finish line, the more habit of turning in finished work comes in the team. All right, recap. Always remember lawn mowing versus project management, and how tidying up is different from lawn mowing, and how it's different from grocery shopping, how it's different from jigsaw puzzles, right? And then you can expand that to the other things that we talked about, novels, etc., or real life work. Questions I think we just covered. So let's move practicals and how to go about some of these things. So the first question is, hey, what should we use? Right? I get this question all the time. Like every single time, oh, I'm tired with this. Can I do this? Should we do this? Right? Like Jira, probably the most common behemoth or whatever, like the industry leader, so to speak. Linear, new kid on the block, Asana and Trello. They've been promoting boards for a while. Basecamp for the true iconoclasts in us. And then Shortcut is one of my favorite. They used to be called Clubhouse, but because the other Clubhouse got a little bit popular, they ended up changing their name. Phenomenal piece of software like Shortcut. If you have a chance to migrate out of Jira or any of these, like I personally like really recommend you try it out. I don't have any affiliate link or something. I wish I had, but it's a phenomenal tool. It has the perfect balance between most of these, and done like the UX is done with nice taste. Anyway, talk is not about Shortcut. Basecamp. Are there any Basecamp users here? I really want to know. Basecamp people.
Yes.
Okay. Has it really worked for you?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. Yeah, that's exactly my experience. Okay, can you like maybe take a couple of minutes, tell us a little bit about your Basecamp experience?
Basecamp is for advanced users, actually. The simpler
Absolutely.
the software, the less features it has, the more precise your actions need to be in order to get meaningful project management out of something which is so underpowered for project management. Basecamp has also come a long way since I last used it. I last used it in 2020, and they've been beefing up on the project management feature side. But there is a sort of theme for which it is a very good fit.
Yeah, the army of one.
Sorry?
Armies of one kind of teams.
Well, also stuff where work tends to be, projects tend to be more self-contained and smaller. And also where you don't really need cross-team collaboration, though, like, yeah. So it's so simple and it is so under featured, like there are almost no features that unless you're very, very good at the mechanics of project management, you will not be able to use it effectively.
Yeah, I think that was very nicely articulate. So Basecamp is that beast which teams really struggle wrangling, fundamentally because I think it needs a little bit of knowledge about how work happens, and without that, it's really hard to navigate Basecamp. Anyway,
Or your project is super simple. Like if it's
yeah,
super simple, you can use anything. You can use Notepad also.
exactly. So I agree. So for what it's worth, like I chose my devil, which ended up being Jira. I've worked with Jira for a long time, but like I said, like this talk is not really about Jira. Whatever things we're talking about, you can do in any tool. Jira just happens to have the most complex and wide set of features. And if you truly have somebody who understands the platform, you can use it really well. And which is one of the reasons why Jira stands out so much, is that it can support multiple different flavors of project management very well. And I'm not talking about the actually when somebody says Jira, usually they have the notion of the old Jira. There's something called as classic Jira. But the thing is, Atlassian has come a long way from those days. That kind of Jira needed one PMP certification person setting up the whole thing for you. Those days are gone, right? There's a thing called New Jira. They call it New Modern or whatever. I forgot the name. So it has come a long way. So if your thoughts about Jira are like 6-year-old, those are invalid. They have come a long way, right? So this is not an endorsement, but I'm saying like your views on Jira might be outdated. it's actually a pretty good piece of software, except that it just needs a lot of maintenance. Anyway, moving
slow.
on to. Mhm.
It's still
Sorry?
slow.
It's not that slow anymore. Like some parts of it are still slow, like search and all, but the fundamental boards and all are not that slow. Although it is like a little bit CPU intensive, they went a little bit heavy on the React or whatever flavor of the day, and so it's a little bit heavy on the JavaScript. So on slower computers, it can struggle the UI, but they managed to solve their server problems.
Okay, good to know.
Tools of trade, I think most of you are going to be familiar with some of these subtasks, tasks, user stories, epics, projects, sprints, statuses, labels, swim lanes. Swim lanes are my favorite. We'll cover swim lanes at the end. Very nifty tool. Again, a little bit advanced, but really, really nice tool. Are there any PMs here? I think PMs love swim lanes. It's a tool built for business verticals and PMs. And if anybody is using swim lanes in a very crafty way, I would love to know. So these are the tools of the trade. This is what we will be using to wrangle our bad project management into good project management. Although, based on the stuff that we have spoken so far, are you feeling at least a little bit confident that understanding only that part, you'll be able to take some of that and fix problems? If you are that's I've done my job well so far. Right. Anyway, so moving on. I'm just going to quickly run through what these mean. What is the semantic meaning of this? And go or present a slightly reductionist take on each of these to help keep it simple, right? If you make a complex definition of task, you're always going to struggle with should this be a task or not, right? And you never, when you are entering work or when you're writing work, you never want to fight the tool, right? You want to be fluent with the tool. So if you know beforehand what does a task mean, then when you write and define work, you don't need to worry about whether it should be a task or a story or a subtask, right? So I want to give a simple protocol for everyone to follow, and then you can evolve it based on whatever works for you, right? So basically any work that needs to be tracked technically is a task, right? But I make only one distinction. The distinction is that tasks usually are not user facing, right? Something that needs to be done, but it's not user facing. I call it a task, right? And I'll come to it in a little bit. Hold the questions, and then it should be like no more than few days. Like I said, 1 to 2 is the best we saw. Should not be run a security audit of all the system is not a task. It's a project. Somebody writes a task, go kick them in the shins. Right? It's not a task. You need to understand tasks have to be meaningful, defined, and should be able to finish that. So 1 to 2 days, again, my personal best thumb rule. For example, enable 2FA, like this is an example from our own Jira board. On this board called CORE core. It has a label called infrastructure. The red thing is an epic. I will come to that. And the enable 2FA is the task description, right? Context, why, it's the description of the task. And in the main body, we have the context and finish line. I'm skipping them because they have too many details, but this is just a general example of a task. A subtask is generally something that does not need to be independently tracked. And it's at the complete discretion of the task owner or owners. In Colon, generally 2 people own tasks because we pair a lot. So, but some organizations only do single. So most organizations do single. So at the discretion of the task owner, they can create whatever subtasks they want in order to make sense of this particular task. In general, a subtask should not be any more than a day. If they are more than a day, then something is off, right? It's a signal. If the distribution between task and subtask is off, then that's a signal that something's wrong and you need to work on it. You need to figure out. This goes back to our 6 principles, right? Divide work into 1 or 2 day chunks. So tasks and subtasks. Next up, user story, one of my favorite. Now I think some people are going to be like, okay, what is this guy about? Right now, looks like agile gurus are back or whatever, right? Don't fret. None of those things are important. User story fundamentally is any user facing work, but independently verifiable. These two are the most important factors for what becomes a user story. Work that is user facing, there has to be some user for this, and then independently verifiable, right? If either of them is not true, then it's not a user story and it should be tracked separately, or it should be part of something else, or it should not be on the board. Any piece of work that you put has to be independently verifiable, which means, let's say Siddharth and I are on a team and I work on it. Siddharth should be able to come and verify that, okay, Swanand did his job or not, right? Independently verifiable without really coming and talking to me. And so that's the most critical aspect of a user story. And in my opinion, this should be your primary unit of the work, because most software we write is user facing. Like I am positing that you make user story as your primary unit of work, right? Of course, it doesn't mean, or I'll give you an example. For example, from our own Jira, inform parent about app registration, right? This was a user story where when a student registers, we want to inform their parents, right? And what happened was, in this story, because the context of finish line was described very clearly, the developers who worked on this, they ended up taking a different route than what was discussed, because they thought it will get the job done better, right? And so that is what good project management enables. It enables people to take decisions that are better for the business, better for the team, better for the people. But anyway, so posit user story, all user facing work independently verifiable, make it the primary unit of your work. Like basically when in doubt, always like task and user story, just default to user story if it follows those two criteria. The third important reason is that user stories, by calling them user stories, they bring user centric thinking into work, right? As opposed to I'm just a task worker who is chugging away a task, versus I am building something for the users, right? So they bring a little bit of user centric thinking into work, which is why user stories are so important. And calling them user, okay, this is a user story, right? What is their story? What are we doing? What are we building for them? So in Cologne, for example, we have a lot of focus on students. It's about the student is one of our core values, right? So everything we do has to have some value towards the students. Otherwise, what are we even doing and why are we even doing something, right? And so just the fact of calling them user stories and using that parlance every day, the domain terminology, it brings that user centric thinking into work. Very important, right? It prevents people from going into the Jira card pusher. If you think about work as tasks that needs to be done versus an app that you are building for somebody, that mindset alone makes a lot of difference. Okay, now I want to just give an example. As a student, I want to get a reminder, whatever, right? The thing is, this thing is crap. This whole flowery language is complete nonsense. I never write my user stories like this. You will find hundreds of articles and theories on why you should write it this way and whatnot. I just do not subscribe to writing user stories in this kind of language. What I really want to know is like, okay, student needs to get a reminder before class so they don't miss the class, right? I don't want to write it in this language. I want to write it very simply, right? And so the reason being, it tracks to our two principles of the 6: focus on why and context, and describe the finish line and not the route. So all that flowery language, if you're using it, just get rid of it. Nobody benefits from that flowery language other than agile coaches and people who do consulting and make money off bad project management, right? No business value there. Sorry, strong opinion, but it is what it is. Right? So don't use flowery language. Use simple language, why, context, finish line, and you'll be good. So, for example, the same user story, much better way to write it is send a reminder to students 5 minutes before class. 1 second. All right. Next one, let's an epic. You know what? I think I need to answer this phone call. Really sorry. I will take a 2-minute break. Maybe we can get some questions if there are. I will take a quick 2-minute break. I really need to answer this phone call.
Okay. So any questions? We can hear your questions while Swanand is attending to his call. Okay, show of hands. How many of you all work with user stories as your primary unit of work? And everyone else? Okay, Swanand.
All right.
All okay?
All okay. Yep. Turned out just family was missing me. Thank God for that. Why do we do what we do? Anyway, so epics. Again, this term is borrowed from the Agile Manifesto and the Agile Principles. Epic, slightly epic name, pun intended, but it's meant for like a larger body of work, and it needs multiple user stories, and it should have a start and end date. These three criteria are a must. If you have work that spans multiple user stories, and again, user story as what I meant earlier, user-facing work, independently verifiable. So there are multiple user-facing pieces of work that are independently verifiable, and you need many of them. What you're looking at is an epic, and every epic should have a start and end date. Like let's say you're doing security things, right? Then it could be like security updates from March 1 to March 15. Things like that could be an epic. They're quite useful. They give you a sense of like a usually like a feature is an epic. Like to give an example, right? One feature is going to have multiple things, multiple different parts, and then that can be like an epic. One example is from our own Jira board again. Student reports phase 1, and description is like, okay, we'll be covering the minimum viable product section of the doc as the scope of the ticket, because and the doc is attached to that ticket, and then there are a bunch of other things, right? Phase 1, so we call it phase 1, and there's like a start and end date. In fact, the owner of this epic was Aram. He's worked on this. This was like almost one year ago, 1.5 years ago. So this is what generally an epic looks like, and it delivers value to the users from multiple pieces of work. And that's all there is to an epic, right? Just these three things. Slightly larger body of work with multiple user stories, should have start and end date. Project, again, slightly a bit of a misnomer, because a lot of the times tools like Jira and whatnot, they call a project as a ongoing responsibility, right? But in our mind, we think project means something that starts and finishes. So there's a little bit of a domain terminology mix-up. Like for example, oh, I am doing this project, it's going to finish and whatnot. But if you're in like product org or something, a project could be, the traditional project is more like an ongoing responsibility. Top of the funnel is a project. Live classes is a project for us, for example, right? Generally speaking, project is just like a catch-all term for all the things looking in one place. Basecamp has projects, for example, right? One project is like one big thing. Whatever, Basecamp 3 could have been like one project, right? And so in general, in project management terms, at least software engineering, project usually means an ongoing responsibility or an initiative. It does not mean something that starts and ends with the time. This is where the traditional work management differs from software, or at least because, and I think that has happened because of the way these tools have evolved. I don't think there is any theoretical or research base to this. It is just how the industry sort of evolved into. It does not end, right? And you would expect a project to end technically, but it does not. Like I didn't invent this, like not my rules. Sprint, again, like a powerful mechanism. Sprint represents a cadence, right? It's an excellent planning tool. Keep in mind that sprints are not a release mechanism. Sprints are only a cadence mechanism, right? They're planning tools. They're not release tools. Never ever back yourself into saying, I will release 10 user stories this sprint and then commit and go finish those. Bad way to work. You're far better off doing Kanban, and there is enough evidence in the industry that Kanban actually enables way faster work and produces more work satisfaction to people than any arbitrary sprint-based planning. A lot of times stakeholders and senior people or whatever EMs, they love sprints because they want to hold people accountable. Oh, you promised you will finish this by next Friday. You must now work on this Sunday and finish it, right? Bullshit. Right? All deadlines are arbitrary. Like most deadlines are negotiable. There are some deadlines that are non-negotiable. For example, for an edtech company such as ours, semester start date is a non-negotiable deadline. Exam start date is a non-negotiable deadline. If the exams are going to start on this, like we can't change it. And so if you're building something for that, we have a very tight or fixed timeline before which we need to do things. But not, or if WhatsApp is building scaling mechanism for New Year's Eve, then that's a hard deadline, right? You can't ship scaling updates to New Year's Eve after New Year is done. You need to ship before. So that's a hard deadline. Almost all other deadlines are negotiable. And so I don't like cornering team into you must deliver this in this sprint and whatnot. In ineffective and bad teams, sometimes you just need to push people to get things done. This is not about that. Right. So I personally use sprints as a cadence tool. But the thing is, you do need a cadence to talk about things and look back on things. And the sprint just gives us that opportunity. Hey, this is the kind of work that we are looking at in the next 2 weeks, or these are the priorities. This is what roughly we're doing. And what happened last week, or what happened in the last 2 weeks? How did we do, etc. Right? So it gives us that cadence to talk about work. This is sprints are about meta work. We need to talk about work, and so sprints are designed for that, a cadence mechanism. A great planning tool. It gives you a chance to sort of figure out how much can you do and whatnot, but it should not be used as a release mechanism. Oh, you know what? I release software at the end of the sprint. We plan this much and we do. These are not great ways of working. So I personally use sprints for cadence. Every sprint has a start and end date, and generally the accepted length of sprints is somewhere between 1 to 2 weeks. Many teams do 1 week, many teams do 2 weeks. We are a little bit iconoclastic in that we do 1.5 weeks. Our sprint starts on Monday, ends on the next Wednesday, and then the Thursday after that is usually free for people to do whatever they want, and the Friday is for sprint ceremonies, right? So that's how we do 8 days of working, 1 day free time, 1 day of planning and cadence. It works great for us. It could, something else could work for you, but it works great for us. And that one free day, again, like when I introduce that idea, people balk at the idea. Oh my God, people are not doing anything, business moving. Like what's going to happen? Like generally, you need, any system needs a little of slack in order to perform optimal and also to produce innovation. No slack, no innovation. If you're always working, delivering in a tight deadline, like you are in for a shockingly bad outcome as a result. People will burn out, you won't do effective things, etc. So you need a little bit of slack in the system. Sprint structure gives you just that exact slack. Without that, there's all a continuous flow, right? You don't have periodic nature, and work and humans are periodic in nature. Anyway, I spoke a little bit too much. Now, some of you are thinking like, okay, but I already have a project, right? And it's a mess. Like all what you are talking, fine, I understand it, but like it's a mess. What to do, right? So yeah, I know, I hear you, but there are a couple of strategies we can use to get over that. First one is, if you already have a project, again, like go back to our first principle, capture all the work that hasn't been captured. That's the first step you want to do. Forget about everything else. To do all of that, leave it. First, go and capture all the work that hasn't been captured, right? Talk to the people who you must talk to, etc. Do this first. Then create epics with a tentative date, right? Epics are your larger bodies of work, which group all the user-facing things together, right? Create epics with tentative date. And then categorize all your work in progress, finishable pieces of work into these epics. So looking at the epic should give you a good idea. Okay, these are the 5 things that are going on in our company at this moment. And then all your WIP items should be categorized into these. And if some of the work is not categorized properly, then that's your problem, that you need to focus on that and fix it. Right? But at the end of this activity, you should have a bunch of epics and a bunch of users facing work captured all into this simple 2-layer category, right? Any more layers and you're adding a lot more complexity than you need, and any less and you don't have enough organization, right? It's like a cupboard. You need a cupboard and you need racks. If you only have racks, you might have problems. If you have a cupboard but no racks, you're going to run into other problems. And then have about 3 upcoming sprints filled up with the work categorized as above. Again, this 3 is an invention of my own, like my experience is that if you have work lined up for about 3 upcoming sprints, that is the ideal sort of amount of work you need to plan. Gives you just enough to plan ahead and does not add too much busy work so that you need to work or see so far ahead. So about 3 upcoming sprints worth of work, especially if you have a current project that is a little bit messed up. All right. So if you do these 3 things, that gives you a great starting point. After this, you can go back to the 6 principles and follow that. right? And again, like epics, tasks, user stories, follow the definitions, and in conjunction with the 6 principles, and you should be able to untangle the mess. If the current project is a mess, the fact that you cannot ignore is that it's going to need one person's constant attention for a certain period of time before it is bent into shape. So if you're thinking, okay, maybe I'll spend like 5 hours on it every day or something, whatever, like, you know, I'm not prescribing how much time you spend on it, but it needs somebody's attention. So attention is more important than the amount of time you spend on that. So let's say if this project is your responsibility, then your attention should be on the cleanup for at least some delta of time until you finish some of these things. And then after that, you can probably do some other things, right? If you are starting from scratch, you just follow the same thing, right? Capture all the work that hasn't been captured, create epics with a tentative date, categorize all your work in progress items or your to-dos into finishable pieces of work, and then do regular 3 sprint planning, right? Fill it up, and then you have a nice organizable board that you can do, right? And then if you have other work, just put it in the backlog, right? Backlog is where you need to, if there's work that you never need to do, put it in the backlog, because nobody ever looks at the backlog, right? Backlog is where work goes to die. It's a black hole. Nothing ever comes out of the backlog. Okay, just joking. Again, 6 principles. This organization is, again, track all the work, all of it, start with 4 lists, and then the third, right to left, top to bottom. This is what the organizing a messy project is about, these 3 things. Okay, there's a chat here. I can't read the chat. Next up, I'm going to talk about labels real quick. Okay, good one. What was it about? Good one.
The backlog thing.
Backlog. And Siddharth, you're saying isn't 3 sprints of work kept on the backlog? Yeah, so good question. So again, that depends on tool to tool. For example, Jira allows you to create sprints and put works in the sprint. And Jira's definition of backlog is something that is not in any of the sprints, is in the backlog. If you enable the sprints feature, for example, so you want like 1, 2, 3 sprints and the tickets or whatever user stories, and then everything else is in your backlog. The thing is, like, human beings are generally not that great at predicting the immediate future, and we don't know like what the work looks like 3 months down the line with the clarity of context and finish line, right? You can add like a loose kind of to-do to that will help you write or draft your epics and draft your user stories in the backlog, but you don't want to have defined work in the backlog too much. You want to keep it in the next like your current and 2 upcoming sprints. As long as you manage that, you should be good, right? It gives you just enough time to go actually do the work. Cool. Labels, right? Extremely powerful. Okay, I think Piyush. All right, thanks, Piyush. See you around. Extremely powerful. I know, like, we're actually way past our timeline. Sorry about that. I'll go a little bit fast now, assuming people still want me to go. Labels are extremely powerful, flexible. They are flexible. They can be used anyway. They are searchable, and they're mostly every single tool has a first-class support for labels. Here's the thing that you don't want to accept is that you are poorer in information organization than you think. Like, you think, oh, there's information, I'm going to organize this information of this organization. Sorry, but you are actually worse at it than you think you are. Like, everybody, including me, we have a inflated sense of how good we are when it comes to information organization. Like, we are just not that good. And so that's why labels are way more flexible. Gmail actually championed labels all those years ago, and people have been using them so well over the years. And I think Sahil's question about having different functions and whatnot, label is the one thing that gives you the organization that you need. Basically horizontal and vertical categorization at the same time is only possible with labels. When I say horizontal and vertical, what I mean is horizontal is your business domain, and vertical is your business, and horizontal is your front end or functional categorization, right? You may have something that is functional, or you may have something that is part of the same business vertical. If you want to categorize something in both the directions, there's only way to do is with labels, right? And so use labels. And the thing is, you can have all the labels in one place, craft your domain terminology, understand and have an agreement what each label means. After that, it's just a matter of putting the labels on the work. And then every single tool supports searching and sorting by labels. So once you do that, then the next part of categorization is searching and sorting and looking at the work, which makes it easy. Right. The thing is, what I was saying earlier, when it comes to information architecture, you are way worse than you think you are. Right. So if you're going to try and organize everything on your own, you're going to do a bad job. What you want to do is you want to make the work surfaceable, and you want to make it searchable, and you want to categorize it as loosely as possible. If you try to create a rigid structure of hierarchy, you're not going to do a good job of it. Swim lanes last. I think, hey Sahil, I wanted to ask you, does this answer the question if you're still around? Let's assume that Sahil has dropped off, and I hope I answered his question. Swim lanes. So swim lanes basically are a review tool, and again, they are also an organization tool. Generally, what they do is that they vertically group and divide the work. Usually, like there's one swim lane per product manager, and one business initiative within the overall business umbrella is your swim lane. Like top of the funnel could be swim lane, or within top of the funnel leads and leads quality. They are different. They could be different swim lanes, or epics could be a swim lane, etc. Right? Generally speaking, swim lane is owned by a business leader, GMs or PMs, like that. It's a tool for leadership, right? And you must, if you are in a leadership position, you should get really good at swim lanes and figuring out how to use swim lanes. You can do like assignee, epic, labels, etc. What they do is they quickly make horizontal, like vertical groups, and stack the cards in that each group. Right, and then that gives you a smaller picture of that whole project, but in the context of that one little thing. And so you get smaller context, whole picture. And so so basically, I encourage leaders to do meta project management every week, around 2 to 3 hours. You need to sit down and look at the board on your own every week. And then when you do, you got to look through the swim lanes and see if anything stands out. Are there any signals? Are there any problems? And then again, so basically you need to review the board weekly and try out all the different swim lanes, assignee, epic, label, initiative, all those things. And these tools make it possible. Oh yeah, I think I did not add example here. Let me try and share. I shared it on your rootconf. I'll share our swim lane from maybe last year. Okay, process last part, honestly. Then we're going to pause and maybe open up the floor for questions. Actually, you know what? Let me try and attempt Siddharth's question. Siddharth, when you say example board, you meant like what does swim lane look like, right? That's what you wanted to show.
Correct.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll either once I'm stopped screen sharing, I'll go look for one. I'll share one. Good question. I totally missed that. Okay, so process quickly. Like if you want to untangle project management, you need to think in terms of roadmap, where and how things are going. Then break the roadmap down into epics, break the epics down to user stories, and then use sprints to drive the cadence, right? This is the most it's a little bit simplistic, but the thing is the process isn't any more complex than this, right? Again, a lot of complexities come through people issues, and they are going to be there no matter like what you do. Like even the tightmost teams have people issues, and so you always need to deal with people issues. I don't want to talk about them at the moment, but fundamentally, untangling any kind of project or work comes down to roadmap, epics, user stories, and cadence. And as long as we follow these principles, generally, you'll be able to make a sense of it. And again, you know, of course, this is a protocol, and because this is a protocol, it depends on people following it, right? So you need people who are bought into the process, and if they are bought into it, then they're going to follow it, right? Even like at Colearn, like even though I wrote like a playbook, shared it with people, we have also struggled sometimes, many times with, and that's because like sometimes people think, oh, it's just too busy work, they slip all the time and whatnot. When we were actively pairing, right now our team size is not that big to actively pair so much. We're going through a different phase of business, But at the time when we were actively pairing for about 70% of everybody's time, we had practically zero issues, because what happens is like having like an accountability partner sort of covers up so many of the issues easily, and the culture propagation is easy. So we use that to as a chef's knife to fix everything. Again, like I shared this earlier, sprints are a cadence mechanism, not a release mechanism. Don't hold people accountable. Like you promised to do these three things. Now you must do this, etc. Life is uncertain, right? You got to deal with those. Everyday operations, again, optimize for left to right movements of cards. If a card is too big, it's not going to move right too fast. If a card is too small, if it's going to overwhelm with your volume, you look at the board, you should not see like a wall of text, and you want to keep it visually clean. So too many small cards overwhelm with volume, and too big a card does not move right to left fast enough. The one problem with is that if a card remains stagnant in some allocation, we stop paying attention to it. Our brain like sort of get used to it. Okay, ye to yahan pe pada hai. Like, like something like that. Oh, it's been there forever. Whatever, like, let's move on. And so you don't want that stagnancy to affect your thinking, right? You want cards to move every day or whatever, like every few days, every cadence, they should move. Priority must be visually clear, right? The to-do column, keep it sorted, priority left, top to bottom, and then revisit the backlog once a month. Backlog is the things that have not been planned to sprint. Revisit it at least once a month to see you offloaded something from your head into the backlog. Now you don't want to forget it. So once a month, generally speaking, is a good time to review. Just going to quickly recap the 6 principles: track all the work, start with 4 lists, to do, doing, review, done, work from right to left, top to bottom, divide your work into 1 to 2 day chunks max, focus on the why and the context. You'll thank me later, and then describe the finish line and not the route, right? That's it. Thank you.
Cool.
Right, we're way past the time, so I guess we'll just stop here.
We'll stop the presentation here, but if anyone has any questions, unless you need to hop, Swaram, do you need to hop?
No, I'm good. Like I kept time for it. So
Great. So yeah, well, Swaran, you've covered the theory of it. If there's one thing I know is that it's merely knowing things is often not enough. You still need to bump into the edges, the sharp edges of project management yourself before you can understand kind of why you have evolved this
yes,
method.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
if there was something that you would want listeners to take away as kind of a guiding principle whenever they are struggling with project management.
Great. Yeah, this gives me a good chance to rant. I think I've said this before in some other talks and also on Twitter. I keep saying is that the one thing that I value a lot is individual agency, which means you need to have the ability to put work on your own plate, right? If and then you need to know like what work you're doing and how are you doing it. You are responsible for yourself, and so it sort of follows into project management as well. Same principle applies here. That you need to own your own project management. So if you have like 3-4 projects, cards and whatnot, your job to keep it clear. And again, this is like I think we sort of gave it either too much or too little importance. It's just like everyday work. If you're working about something, you also need to update the team and talk about it, right? Just writing the code is not enough often. And then on some days, just writing the code and see, if you solve a problem, nobody cares about Jira ticket. If you do something and retention is bumped up by 5%, nobody cares whether you wrote it on Jira or not. So either go solve the hardest problems without people even noticing, or if you cannot, then you're down to working with other people. Then you need to follow the process.
Yeah.
So that's generally it.
And do you have one process for the whole org or?
Great question. Unfortunately, no. This process is tailored very heavily towards software development teams.
No, across the software product engineering org.
Yeah. So this is we follow these things across the product engineering org. But I think some of the other like teaching and operations teams are also following something similar. Aram recently did a Q&A session with our teaching team. We call them Gurujwaras, which are our teachers in Kolar. And he explained some of these things and how we work. and they loved it, and now they are using the same system, right? And so some of these principles are carried over into other functions as well. So we have found good success in getting a buy-in from different teams. And for product engineering, because I was responsible for the entire org, I was able to like say, okay, this is how we're going to do it, and people followed me for whatever reason. All right. Great. I think then that's a wrap. I think it's probably
Wrap one last pumping this.
Oh.
How do you onboard new folks onto Jira?
Pair programming, my friend. Like, just pair them with someone. Like, in the beginning, just have them do the project management when someone else who has done it before is with them. And then have a playbook of how you do things, right? So basically, there is this magical doc every organization should have. It's called Developer Day Zero, right? On their first day, what docs should they read, setting it up and whatnot, and your project management playbook should be a part of that, right? And so I call it the Developer Day Zero documentation. So definitely have a playbook of how you do things, and it should cover their basic minimum, and then take it from there. Some teams are highly productive, and sorry, Shreyas, does that answer? Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Mahendra asks, some teams are highly productive, some are not. How to have a work distribution? Okay, it's, well, to be honest, that's the leader's job, and I think like we work in the principle of sign up for work. Like people pick their own work, but if you really have something that you want one person to do, then just give it to them, right? And if teams are not productive, like why work with them, etc. Like I would go to that length, but sometimes obviously you must work with them. In that case, like then I would leave it to the leaders to figure out, like how to do distribution. You can assign tasks in the to-do column. I just don't recommend it. Siddharth, do you want to also like speak a little bit on this?
Yeah, sometimes teams are not productive because the code is a mess. Then you have a different problem. You need to go clean up the code, make sure. Sometimes like you in a legacy system, like you hire a new team to, kind of refresh the system and rescue it or whatever. And in those cases, they are bound to be less productive, but that's just because they're hacking through a whole jungle of weeds, to get even the simplest things done. So then that requires a different approach of actually putting in the investment to make them more productive. A lot of places, developer experience is very poor. It makes sense to put aside some resources to improve the developer experience, especially if it's a complicated front end, like the way like Yarn and React and all those things, the way they build those bundles in the browser and all, that can get quite heavy, and that JavaScript compilation can take a fair amount of time. And so teams are unproductive for a number of reasons. I hesitate to, arrive at the easy conclusion that it's because people are not having a good work ethic. It is always a possible reason, but it's often not the only reason. So if teams are not highly productive, you have to fix the productivity issue. On that, I completely agree with you, Swanand. But also, it is important to go to war with the army you have, not the army you wish you had. And so knowing what is the productivity of a team is step one, so that then you can get better guesses about how long a particular piece of work might take. And then improving the productivity of the team is always an ongoing process for leadership.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think often like basically leadership, specifically business leadership, is about having the right signals, right? And then low productivity is a very strong signal. So something is wrong somewhere. So worth finding out why. Great. I guess then let's stop here. Thank you so much. Like I said, we went way over past the time. My apologies, but at least I had fun. This is like I said, this topic is a pet topic for me. I can geek out on this anytime.
Thanks so much, Swanand. It's a pleasure. And thank you everyone for attending. And we'll see you at the next edition.
Bye-bye.
Bye.